All right, hey everybody, welcome to episode 50 of the Stop and Give Me 20 podcast, 20 minutes with some of the world's top fitness professionals. I'm your host, Anthony Randy. You can check out the show notes at stop20podcast.com or just go to continuefit.com. By now, you know that that's where all my stuff is. Make sure you go to iTunes. Please subscribe, rate, and review the show. It really helps us out. All right, for today's episode, I have on Will Fleming. And Will is the owner of Force Fitness and Performance in Bloomington, Indiana. Been open since 2008. In addition to that, he has a bunch of books and training products, including the Complete Olympic Lifting Handbook. He also is the creator of the Certified Weightlifting Performance Coach, like over 1,000 certified coaches around the world. Highly recommend any of his products. I actually recently, 2 months ago, had to pull out one of his DVDs because I had a young kid in here. I wanted to remember his progressions. They're really good. Also, Will's an Olympic trials participant, All-American athlete. He's a school record holder at Indiana University as a hammer thrower, which is, growing up, I've never really met any hammer throwers in my whole life until I got into this business, but we'll talk
Me
a little
neither.
bit. We'll talk more about that. Will, thanks for doing this.
Thanks, man. I appreciate you having me on the show. I'm a big fan of the show. I like the format, and I like how it rolls and stuff like that. So I'm excited to be on it. All
right, very cool. Let's get into it then. What is your story?
Yeah, man. It really started. A lot of times, if somebody asks me how I got in the industry, I will talk about this kind of formative story at the age of 15. But I'd really say it was like even younger than that. Like my brother was a great athlete. He was a Big Ten champion in the shot put. My dad was a Big Ten Division I football player, started for 3 years at Indiana University back in the 60s. So I had this like physical family. So I knew that like, athletics was going to be something in my life. And then so I was kind of growing up and I bounced around to different sports. At age 10, you would ask me, I would have been a baseball player. At age 12, I would have said I was going to be a basketball player, and flip flop over and over and stuff like that until I got to high school. And I remember just like getting absolutely destroyed in my first varsity football game against our crosstown rival, to the point that I'm flying 5 yards down the field, and the all-state fullback is on top. I'm playing linebacker, and he's on top of me, shaking me, and I can look over my shoulder while I'm lying on the ground and see their all-state tailback running in for a touchdown over my shoulder. And I was just like, man, I got to do something about this, because I was 5'10", which I still am. I haven't grown since my freshman year of high school, but wow. 5'10", 155 pounds. Ran a 5'2", 40, had a 24-inch vertical jump, and just was like not a very impressive athlete. And I was kind of like, at that same year, my freshman year of high school, this is my sophomore year of high school, my freshman year of high school, my brother had won the Big Ten championship in the shot put, and he's, just this, my brother's 6'3", 240 pounds, really fast, strong, big guy. And so I'm like, man, how am I going to catch up to him? He is like, he's super athletic. I'm too small to play football. And so I started really getting into the weight room. I actually found out where that all-state fullback and all-state tailback worked out, and went over there and said, can you make me into a great football player? And this ties into kind of how I got into the industry or how I got into what I focus on a lot is they were like, we're an Olympic weightlifting club. So yeah, if you want to compete in weightlifting, then we'll make you a better football player. And I said, whatever it takes, whatever you guys did to those guys to do to me, And so I got into lifting, and I was just all in. I would go over there 3 days a week. I'd lift in our advanced PE class. I'd, go to local gyms, and, I kind of always ended up finding myself like somehow gravitating towards Olympic lifting movements, snatches, clean and jerks, squats, and bench press and stuff like that, and just got bigger and bigger and stronger. And finally, by the time I was a junior, late in my junior year and senior year of high school, I was getting recruited for football and track, and got to live at the Olympic Training Center for weightlifting. And so it was just like, I finally I caught up to my brother. Actually did some stuff that my brother didn't do in high school, that, I was like, all right, I've caught him, so that was it, man. It was just like, I was always kind of chasing my brother and wanting to be as good as him.
Wow. So your introduction to weights is pretty much Olympic lifting. That's crazy because no one has ever said that.
Yeah, it was interesting. I did my high school weight room class, right? And so there was like, it was basically like bench, incline bench, squat. And I did that for about, 6 months. And then I was like, I want to add more. And it was just right into Olympic lifting. So it was like, right off, I was 15 years old. So I'm 35. So I've been doing weightlifting stuff for, 20 years now.
Wow. It's just cool because a lot of times, the weightlifting class is one thing, but like that question really relates to what was your spark, right? And that's what, that was your spark, that getting nailed and then going in there and then but not doing the, not like, it's rare because we always hear like the aesthetic piece or somebody did want to get bigger or gain weight, but they do end up more of a bodybuilding kind of a program as opposed to the,
I always joke, like if I present like, hey, if I had walked into these two great football players, these guys who just obliterated me on the field, I said, hey, where do they work out? Went and found it. And if their coaches had been bodybuilding coaches, I'd go around trying to present on how to do better bicep curls, maybe, who knows, right? But it just so happened. And my coaches at the time, I was really fortunate. One was an Olympian in 1992. One was the president of USA Weightlifting and had been an Olympic team coach. So, I got really lucky on that front that I got those guys teaching me how to lift. And so, yeah.
It's interesting reading a Malcolm Gladwell book. I forget what it might have been, Outliers. Just it's a similar thing where they were talking about the guys who like when they grew up, and it turned out like the programmers, right? And it just turned out that Bill Gates was in the university town that had the biggest computer and they were allowed to go in. And so it just reminds me of that. Like here you are, like you walk into this place and it just happened to have that USA weightlifting guy. It's amazing how this life works like that.
It was very fortunate for me, and that's what sparked me wanting to be a coach. Cause I was like, I went from a kid who wasn't going to get recruited, wasn't going to get all these opportunities, to a kid that got all these opportunities. And so I thought to myself, man, if I could do that for somebody else, that would be really cool, And that coach, so the big philosophy for me has always been that coaching can open doors for people that otherwise wouldn't be there.
Love it. Let's talk about superheroes growing up, because you got the athletic dad, you got the athletic brother. I don't know if at the time you were just like, no, I want to kill my brother because he's too good, or if he was your hero. But who was that? Who was that person growing up that influenced you the most?
Honestly, I think nowadays I would totally recognize that it was my mom and my dad and all that kind of stuff. But at the time, it really was my older brother. He's 8 years older than me, so it was never. I was like too little to be annoying, I think, or too little to be like him kicking my butt or anything like that. Yeah. So, but I just remember growing up and going to every basketball game he had, every track meet, every baseball game, all that kind of stuff, and just being like, man, if I could just be as good as him, can I, and then ultimately it was like, can I outdo him? And so I was always chasing, him, and, he was like, honestly, my brother, he was like a model and all this kind of stuff. So it was like, he was like a superhero to me being 8 years younger than him. He was just like, a good student, good athlete and all that kind of stuff. And I just always, and I think that's kind of hard to replicate, but I love trying to chase after him. And on any instance in which I have surpassed him, like he was a Big Ten champion in track, but I was an All-American in track. And he always wanted to be an All-American. So I'd try to brush away the fact that I wasn't a Big Ten champion and drill into the idea that I was an All-American and he wasn't, now that we're both adults.
I'm sure you remind him that of a lot.
Yeah, I do. I try to remind him of that quite a bit. Yeah.
What about now? And I know, you've worked with a lot of different I think, is it Athletic Revolution, right? Athletic
Yeah,
Revolution.
I mean,
Yeah.
we've worked with a lot of
Yep.
different, through a lot of different, with a lot of different athletes,
Yep.
the course of our business. Yeah.
And then you've also, you have all these products. You've done a lot with the IYCA. I mean, who are you trying to be a superhero to with your message?
Man, outside of, this is a hard one when you go like family, right?
Yeah.
Because I always try to think like a ranking list in my everyday life, and like family's number one, and then business and coaching, and then any sort of personal pursuits past that. So obviously being a superhero to my son, I'm a big believer in that the most important thing you might do in life might not be something you do, but someone you raise. And so I'm big on that in terms of how I try and impact my son. But past that, outside of there, I think it's like the athletes and people in my gym, particularly. I tell my athletes that I work with, we have 100 athletes per week that come in. And so I tell those athletes that, I want them to achieve their goals, and I want them to win this and win that and all that kind of thing. But number one thing is like, I want to get an invite to their wedding one day. I
Yeah.
want to be someone who's impactful enough in their life that they're like, I want them to come to my wedding. I want Will to be at my wedding because he helped me, he taught me this, or he helped me do this. And I think that encompasses all of that. So I'd say those athletes that come in, and we get them all, we get them from different ages and different groups and, different socioeconomic backgrounds and stuff like that. But, if I get that invite to their wedding one day, then I know that I probably did my job.
Yeah, good answer. Good answer. What about now? Like, who's like some people you're looking up to? I mean, you like I said, you've been involved in a lot of different organizations. You could do great podcasts with Coach Dose. You're the Performance Podcast. You have your own podcast, and so you have you get to talk to a lot of amazing people. Who are you kind of looking up to now? Who are some people, someone out there that's doing some great things that you kind of look up to?
Gosh, this is there are some really good coaches that they're actually at different stages that I think are doing some awesome stuff that I try and emulate. And one guy we just recently had on the podcast is a guy named Mike Uden, and he's young. Mike's younger than me and all that kind of stuff. But if you talk to him, his enthusiasm is just really, really contagious. And I'm trying to emulate what the kind of relationships that he's making with his athletes in that, I think he had 8 MLB draft picks last spring training people out of his garage, right? Which, is pretty incredible. And he had, most of these people are not just guys who have showed up. I think 6 of them he had trained since they were in middle school. So he had trained them since, 7th, 8th grade, all the way to the point where they're, either getting drafted out of high school or getting drafted out of college and stuff like that. So that sort of thing. And I think that there's never one superhero when you grow up. It's kind of like, what are they doing? What can I pick from that and pull? And, obviously you talk about Coach Dose and the kind of stuff he's done. That's incredible that I get a mentor like him and someone that I get to try and emulate and all that kind of stuff. And then the people, just locally, there's people in my community that are just great men or whatever that that I've tried to make good relationships with. So it's outside of fitness. It's just like, how are you impacting our own community? That's something that's in a core value of ours, at the gym is, be a force of good in the community. So, those people, there's a local guy named Ronnie Remack that just, that probably every person who's ever met this guy says he's their best friend. So, like you're like, hey, Ronnie, yeah, Ronnie and I are great friends. Yeah, I'm great friends with Ronnie.
I knew him before you.
Yeah, right. I think I've been great friends with this guy longer than you. So, guys like that, like, and everybody has one in their town where you're like, is everybody his best friend?
Yeah.
And just the way they treat people and how they impact people and stuff like that. Those are people that I'm trying to emulate. So in the business, I'm seeing guys like Mike Uden or Dose or listening to Coach Boyle on Strength Coach podcast all the time and going, man, I want to do that, or Eric Cressy or whatever. And then, those people locally who are trying to make the same impact that you want to make in your community.
Very cool. Very cool. I know you're doing that too, and that's one of the reasons why we get you on our shows is because you are making that impact. But I want to segue that into, your facility is called Force Fitness in Bloomington, and We were talking earlier a little bit about, the business aspect of it, and you've just been talking about it right now in terms of, maybe who you're trying to be a superhero to or who you're looking up to and like things that people create and creating a culture. You've had this business since 2008, which again, in this business sometimes can be, it's either you have it for 2 years or you go forever. But what are some things you're trying to do specifically to create that culture, to create that place where those people want to come back? That it's, because especially for you, like the way you got into training, it's hard to convince somebody to train through the coaching sometimes. It has to be about the atmosphere and the culture. Talk to us about how you are doing that in your own business at Force.
Yeah, 100%. So, I have a great team of people around me that work with me on every day. And so our business is kind of, semi-private personal training. We have group training for adults. We have our athletic performance training. And then we have our like weightlifting team, which is kind of a little separate thing. It's kind of Will's side project. But so we really have this, it's kind of a difficult thing because we have all these people who have different goals when they come in. The person who comes in for adult group training really doesn't have a lot in common with the athlete necessarily, right? So, you're trying to establish almost a common vision, and that vision can't be around, something along the lines of, we're the, or a vision or kind of reputation even that's what's out in the community, So it can't be around, this is a place to go lose weight because that's not what our athletes are about, and it's not the place where it's for the hardest workouts because that's not what, maybe our personal training people are about and all that kind of stuff. So trying to establish that common vision across the board is one that we've done. And I think it's really about like, we separate ourselves based on the fact that you're going to come to our place because that we have the best coaches, the best facility, and we have people that are going to create the best relationships. And so we're never going to be able to market with a Orange Theory Fitness that has, franchise dollars behind it or anything like that. But we can really establish awesome relationships with our clients. And that's like our very, one of our very highest core values is that we create great relationships. And that's like our mission is, to create great relationships with our clients. So if we're able to do that across the different programs and with different coaches who all have this vision that working out should make you feel better, not worse kind of idea, that you come in and maybe a tough workout, but at the end you're happy you went, as opposed to like, oh, I'm just beat. We try and bring that across all of our programs so that we have some sense of community, because otherwise it can become too pocketed. And so I rely a lot on, our general manager at the gym, our director of coaching, one of our coaches named Matt Myers, who's really smart, does a lot of our adult programming. And then one of our coaches named Brandon Price, does most of our group programming. Vince DePremio, our guy who does most of our sports performance programming. And so, and I just go in and have a hand in each of those to make sure that everything's in the, style and way that I originally intended. But then, trusting those coaches and making sure that we all have this common vision about, smart training and creating great relationships with our clients.
Awesome. Great advice. Because if anybody, and that's something that I think that is the future of training. People have to really understand that if you want a facility, great advice. All right, now it's time for the stop and give me 5 rapid fire questions and answers. Will, you ready?
Yeah, I'm here.
All right. I said, I was reminding everybody you are the record holder at Indiana University as a hammer thrower, who I've never met a hammer thrower before, so this is exciting. Weirdest experience, there's got to be some kind of weird experience throwing that hammer. Oh,
yeah. Well, okay, so this was probably 2 months into throwing the hammer. It was after my freshman season. I'm out there in the summer, and the guy who had been the previous school record holder, really good, the guy whose record I beat, he was out there, and it's probably the saddest moment I've ever seen in hammer throwing, the weirdest, but he had just gotten a puppy, and he's like throwing the hammer in practice, and as he comes around, with a 16-pound ball. His puppy runs from out of the forest and gets hit by the hammer. This is, a couple months into throwing. I'm totally shocked, devastated, and crying there. The puppy ended up being okay, though, so that was a good thing. But I kept up with it even after seeing that horrific accident.
Oh my God! I wasn't expecting that.
I know, it was bad, man.
Holy! I got to take a moment. Hold on. All right, lunch with any public figure from the past. Who is it?
Oh my gosh, this is going to be a tough one. I have really always enjoyed stuff from World War II. And Winston Churchill would be the first person to come to mind in terms of just like some of those leadership characteristics, although he seems like he might be a terrible person to have lunch with. If I could ask some good questions, I think I could get some really neat answers out of him.
There you go. We'll make sure that we have some guidelines with him when we set that up. In the book, the one thing they ask, what's the one thing you can do such that by doing it, everything else will be easier or unnecessary? So I'm going to ask you, what's the one thing athletes can do such that by doing it, everything else will be easier and better for their Olympic lifting experience?
Yeah, so I'm a big generalist. I don't like to get really tiny and specific in technique until later on. So the one thing that any athlete could do is if they are doing an Olympic lift, they can almost ensure that they're doing it closer to perfect if their weight is balanced across their whole foot throughout the entire movement. So you think about that tripod foot idea, weight across the 3 points on your foot. If your weight's balanced across all 3 points, your Olympic lifts will be tremendously better.
Love it. All right. If you could be in any movie, what would it be?
Man, this one I've been thinking about. I think I would replace Arnold Schwarzenegger in Predator. Yeah.
All right. Very cool. All right. We are flying in a coach to train you for the week. Who do you want?
Oh gosh. I'd say I'd want to spend some time with Anatoly Bondarchuk, and that's because of my hammer throwing roots. And unfortunately, I actually had the opportunity to move up to Canada and train with him after college. And I say unfortunately, but decided to go in the other direction and open the gym. So I did have that shot. I just decided that I would open my gym instead.
Very cool. All right. All right, let's wrap it up with the last couple questions. You're always working on something. So any projects you're working on that's getting you excited?
Yeah, just the stuff that we're working on with Pat Beath and the NSPA, which he's kind of put together. And it's myself and Coach Dose and Lee Taft and Chris Moore have put together some different products to do continuing education. And we're actually going to do a master coach thing where we're all the people who have done our different certs will come and test in front of us on a hands-on part of things. And I'm pretty excited about that. I think that's going to be really cool to be a part of. So the stuff we're doing with the NSPA and Pat Beath is really cool right now.
Very cool. All right. What's that letter to young Will? What advice are you going to give yourself?
Oh man, it would be something about, you always think man, if I could go back to college and high school with the stuff I know now, wouldn't stuff be way, way easier? So I think I got a lot of stuff, but I think it's routine and habit and, just making that morning routine kind of thing where you get up early, you make your bed, you dive into a book, you meditate, you pray, whatever that thing is for you. And, then you make breakfast. And if I had started doing that when I was in college or high school, man, I feel like I would have been 10 times as productive as I was.
Yeah, I got to say, sometimes I read some of these books and I'm like, man, I wish this book was out when I was 20, So, but very cool. Well, you're obviously doing some great things. Love all the stuff. Like I said to people before, any of Will's Olympic lifting stuff, if you can get your hands on it, absolutely. He's a great coach. Will, thanks so much for coming on and doing this.
And thanks for having me on the show. It was a lot of fun, man.
All right, well, that's going to do it for episode 50 of the Stop and Give Me 20 podcast. Thanks to Will Fleming for coming on. Make sure to check out all the links to all his stuff at stop20podcast.com, which will lead you to continuefit.com as well. Don't forget, please subscribe to the show, leave us a review and a rating. That really helps us out. My name is Anthony Renna. Thanks so much for stopping by.